on OB or organizational behavior. What we are going to do in this coming 2 hours is take forward from wherever we have left. But as usual, what we do is we quickly recap whatever we have done till now, and then we take it forward. Correct? Great. So starting off from our session itself, we start that organization behavior. We define what is organization, what is behavior. We have also tried to understand the significance of each of these in the organizational context. We have also addressed and understanding organizational context from three aspects. One is the individual behavior, then the group or team behavior, and the third is from an organizational structure behavior. In the individual front, what we had done in the first 2-3 sessions was we discussed about perceptions, decision making, we discussed about motivational theories, we discussed how motivational theories are going to impact in terms of the work context. That means how in terms of work design certain things could be changed, which we are taking as a study from motivational theory. Then in the last 2 sessions we were addressing on groups and teams. We understood therein that individuals behave differently while individually when they are working in silos or as groups. So we discussed certain group dynamics over there, like the conformity norm, the group thinking, and we have also in the last session itself discussed about what is a group, what is a team, different types of groups that exist. Why do people want to be a part of group? That we discussed for status, for security, for self-esteem, for growth, for empowerment, so and so forth, as we discussed. We also discussed how teams are formed and how groups and teams are different, and we discussed that from a different cultural context also the significance of each of these changes as well. Correct? This is what we have discussed till now. What we are going to discuss today in the coming 2 hours we'll be discussing on 3 areas. One, we'll be discussing on communication, since communication is the tool where all these things are connected in terms of communicating the message, communicating the culture, communicating the values. So we'll discuss the first aspect around 45 minutes or so. We'll discussing on communication, the model that exists, and second part of the session we'll be spending time to understand leadership, the leadership models and theories that exist. And in the third part, when people are working in groups and teams, there definitely exists power and politics. So if you have taken from a motivational theory where certain people want power as well. So we will discuss on power and motivation, power and politics as well. So 3 areas that we will be discussing: 1, communication; 2, leadership; and 3, power and politics. Great. So we'll start with our first session on communication. Now, students, communication is something that we had been learning from our childhood days. Yes, it is? Yes. But today we'll be looking at from how communication is impactful from an organizational context. We'll also look into how it's kind of going to define and modulate the norms of the organizations as well, where communicating effectively becomes very much essential. So what we are going to look into this part of communication would be, we'll be discussing identify the main functions of communication. We will figure out what are the main functions of communication. We'll figure out, describe the process, how does the process exhibit itself, and we'll also distinguish formal and informal communication. Now, within the organization itself, there exists formal and informal as well. So, how do they vary? We'll also look into how communication differs when it is downward, upward, and lateral with examples. Now, when we are saying downward, upward, lateral is based on the hierarchy. So, if it's coming from a lower hierarchy to an upper one, it is upward. If it is reverse, it is downward. If it is to the peer groups, it is lateral. We will also look into the oral, written, and non-verbal communications as well, and analyze the advantages and challenges of electronic communication as well. So, since we are living in an age of an electronic revolution, and nobody is no industry in fact is not touched by this electronic medium of communication as such. But when we are speaking of digital revolution, communication from a digital front has really taken industry norms to a different level altogether. And we will also identify what are the common barriers to communication that exist. This is what we'll be addressing in the first part of our series of communication. Great. So let's start with the definition itself. So what is communication? If you want to define communication in simple language, it is a transference and understanding of meaning. So very important. The key words over here, students, is transference of meaning. So let me tell you first of all that we represent certain things. Every individual, in fact, represent different things differently. And that is the reason when Albert Copsey always mentioned about the map territory distinction. Map is how people represent it internally, or the meaning that they give. And that meaning transference is communication. So we are not looking at just the words. Now a lot of time people misunderstand communication with only transference of words, or maybe restrict the definition to language. Now language could be any, but the point that we are looking and referring to is the transference of meaning. Has the meaning that the individual has got has really transferred is what we are looking at. The functions, if you see, of communication are: one, it controls member behavior. What does it mean? That means if things are communicated in the right context, then if you see, the member behavior could be influenced. Now when in an organizational context, when people speak about influence, when people speak about persuasion skills, when people speak about convincing skills, when people speak about motivating others. Now, what is the medium that the people use? It's communication. Without communication, all these skills that we have discussed will not happen. The skills of persuasion, convincing, selling, and those skills could not happen without communication. It fosters motivation, what it is to be done. So motivation, definitely, how we can motivate people better. So words have power as well. Certain words, when they say, maybe as phrases, and that's the reason quotes are so very effective. For example, quotes like, if you always do whatever you always done, you will always get what you have always got. I repeat, if you always do what you have always done, you will always get what you always got. Means what? Means that if you keep on doing the same things that you have already done in the past, it naturally implies that you will keep on getting those things in life which you had been getting in the past. It clearly means that if we want different things in life to happen, we want different things to do. Just like when you students have taken up this decision to do an MBA, in spite of all challenges, isn't it? Because you know that if you don't do differently, then things will not change. And today, the value of doing an MBA, we all know that it's highly significant. So it kind of changes things as well. So it's important to understand these dynamics. And it provides a release for emotional expression. Now, human beings are not separate entity or robotic machines. We are beings with emotions. That means we have a lot of emotions like anger, happiness, joy, depression, frustration, irritability, sadness. Now all these moods could be channelized through communication. Now understand, don't restrict your definition of communication only to what you are speaking outside. We communicate at two levels. One, the communication that happens externally, and the other, the communication that happens to ourselves. Self-communication. Is that important? Yes, because that is one communication that's constantly happening as well. So we need to understand, we need to communicate it as well very clearly. And that's so very important to understand this dynamics about it. So the point is, if even for emotional release as well, it's important that we communicate things better. And it also provides information needed to make decisions. So when you're dealing with, when we spoke about yesterday about dealing with teams or groups where decision need to be made. Now decision is a process wherein people decide on things by using the tool of communication. Now, say for example, if you're doing a brainstorming, is communication important there? Yes. If you're doing, for example, a fishbone analysis, do we talk to self and gather data from others? Is communication important there? I bet it will. Yes or no? So the point is, so communication has their own functions and there are important ones as well. Now we look at the steps involved, the process. What is the process involved? Now see the steps between a source and a receiver. Now for any communication to happen, there is a source and there's a receiver, the sender and the receiver. So this results in transference and understanding of meaning. So whenever we are saying of transference, there needs to be a sender and there needs to be a receiver. Now the sender, in this case, the sender actually receives the information. Now that's critical role to understand. Now sender over here actually initiates the message. The sender actually puts it across and initiates the message to encoding. What is encoding? Encoding is translating thought to message. That means encoding is where the message gets encrypted. Maybe as a language, maybe as a phrase, maybe as a story. It could be any of those. Message. What is communicated? The message is actually put in as well. Then the channel. The channels are also decided. It is a medium the message travels. The channel could be oral, verbal, non-verbal, electronic, any of those. Or paralanguage, body language, so it's called the channel. Then the decoding. Decoding is where the message is decoded by the receiver, where the receiver's action in making sense of the message. So the message then is it started interpreting by the receiver, the person who gets the message. Noise, what is the noise in communication? Noise is a thing that interferes with the message. That means anything that interferes with the prime message is called noise. Feedback or a return message regarding the initial communication. What is the feedback? Now, feedback is when sender gives the information to the receiver. Anything that comes from the receiver back to the sender becomes a feedback. Now, this feedback need not necessarily has to be a verbal one or a written one. It could be a non-verbal as well. That's the reason it is always said, you cannot not communicate. I repeat, it is said that you cannot not communicate. Means what? It means that we are always communicating. Now the communication need not be only verbal, because our bodies are also communicating continuously in this process of communication. The channels. Now let's look at the channels available. Now if you see the channels, the medium selected by the sender through which the message travels through the receiver. What is the channel that the sender has thought of sending the message is what we'll look at as far as channel is concerned. Then types of channel. The types are formal ones and the informal ones. Now what are the formal ones? Formal ones are established by the organization and transmit messages that are related to the professional activities of the members. They are kind of designed by the organization. Now it could be email communication. It could be a meeting which is kind of standard designed by the organization. Informal, used to transmit personal or social messages in organization. These informal channels are spontaneous and emerge as a response to individual choices. They are not designed by in organizational structure, but they kind of come up very fast. For example, the grapevine or gossip are examples of these informal channels. The direction of communication. Now, the direction of flow of communication. Now, it could be any of those. It could be upward, downward, lateral throughout the organization. Now, for the smooth functioning of an organization, we know that communication is important. Now, but the communication could be upward. Upward means going up through the hierarchy. Or it could be downward as well, where it's coming through a chain of command from a CEO to a vice president to deputy managers to executives. So it's a downward movement. Or the communication could be lateral, means communication is going through to peer groups or through cross-functional teams at the same hierarchy. They're all lateral communications. Great. Interpersonal communication. Now, what is interpersonal communication? It is of three types. If I am to put it, interpersonal as the name signifies, two people need to be involved. Where two persons are involved, that's where interpersonal comes into picture. Now, interpersonal communication can be oral communication. That means that there's a voice involved as well. There's an element of actually physical presence out there as well, wherein advantages are speed and you get instant feedback. In oral communication, the physical presence is always there. And disadvantages are, now in communication, students, we always need to understand when we speak of communication, there always exists a chance of misinterpreting communication, and we all know that this happens. So the communication gaps, as they are called. Now, communication gaps could be due to various reasons. Now, one of the prime reasons is because people come from different background as well. So it could be difference of perception, attitude, personalities as well. So any of those reasons. So distortion of message could happen. When we speak of written communication, the advantages are tangible and verifiable. Now, what does tangible and verifiable mean? In the written communication, let's take an example. Email communication is a written communication. Now, email communication is a black and white communication. It means the communication can be put across in black and white clearly as well. So that's tangible and verifiable as well. And you know that written communication are a source where it could be produced as a legal proof as well. The disadvantages of written communication are time consuming and lacks feedback. That means it is a time consuming process, and because people have to write it down, type it down, so it consumes time. The non-verbal communication. What does it happen in non-verbal communication? In non-verbal communication, the advantages of non-verbal communication are supports other communications and provides observable expressions of emotions and feelings. So when we speak of non-verbals, what are the non-verbals associated? Non-verbals are tonality and body language. So it's not always that people just listen to your words. People unconsciously are also looking into what is your body communicating as well. They say that's precisely the reason, students, it is being said that you can tell 1,000 lies from your mouth, but our body never lies. For the simple reason, there's a lot of body language or non-verbal language comes from an unconscious processes. Now, all the verbal communications are conscious processes involved. So, the non-verbal, if you see, it supports the emotional aspect. The disadvantages when we speak of non-verbal communication is that misperception of body language or gestures can influence receivers' interpretation of messages. Now, it has always been, seen, written, read about a lot that, look into the body language. Like, for example, people are like this, they are closed. Or when people are like this, they're kind of very defensive, stuff like that. But the point is, we need to understand very clearly that non-verbal messages are to be looked as indicators, not as conclusive proof. Suppose if someone is getting very cold, he might do like that. It doesn't mean he's closed. I hope it is very important to understand this. So, when we speak of non-verbal messages of a person, we need to look in from the context and situation. Important to understand this facet. Body movement. Now, we have mentioned that the non-verbal are unconscious motions that provide meaning. So, very important. It shows extent of interest in another and relative perceived status differences. Now, the non-verbals attach on or add along lots of meanings associated as well. Intonations and voice emphasis. Now, one of the aspects of non-verbals comes under the aspect of tonality. Now, tonality is anything and everything related to sound is tonality. So what is intonations? Intonations are the voice tone, is the pitch. If I want to speak in simple language, the pitch of the sound. Intonation is when the voice really goes up. For example, if I say, "Are you coming?" So it's a kind of intonation voice going up. Or if you want to come down as well, the deflection point, as we call it, or Are you coming? So the deflection point or the voice emphasis where certain words are stressed upon more for emphasis or for importance. So the way something is said can change meaning. Now, this is something interesting. I'll give an example to say a single sentence, same sentence based on which word it is emphasized, it changes the meaning altogether. Let's take an example. The example is, let's take a simple sentence. The simple sentence is, Shilpa had a little dog. The sentence is, Shilpa had a little dog. Now, based on which word I pick up for emphasis, the meaning changes. For example, if I tell you, Shilpa had a little dog, means what? Means it existed in the past, might be it's not there now. So I've emphasized on had. Now if I change the emphasis word, if I tell you, Shilpa had a little dog, so where is your attention going? Your attention is going to, small, cute, tender. Or if I tell you, Shilpa had a little dog. So we see that the emphasis on dog, or if I change the emphasis word, and if I say, you know what, Shilpa had a little dog, means based on the emphasis means the sentence is same, students, but the way it is put across as emphasis words, our meaning and attention changes. So that's the importance of a voice emphasis. It could be also about facial expressions. Now, facial expressions showing what kind of expressions are you dealing with, showing emotion. The physical distance between the sender and receiver does matter a lot as well, wherein it depends on cultural norms. Now, if you see in Asian countries, generally the cultural norm says for more physical proximity. They are more close to each other. They more believe in family bonding and association. But if you go to Western cultures, more of it, they are physically kind of distant apart. The physical proximity is less as a part of cultural norm. They can express interest or status as well. One of the things to check rapport between two people. Do you know what is the rapport? Rapport is the relationship between two people, or bonding between two people. So they say that if you want to check rapport between two people or a team, please check their physical distances. They say that less the physical distance between people or group of people, it is the chances are more they are bonded and well knit, means they are related to each other very well. And that's precisely the reason with our friends we are very physically close as well. Whom we get along well as well, we are very close to each other as well. The three common formal small group networks. Let's look into some examples of small group networks of communication. One, it could be a chain. Now what does chain mean? Now chain is so when we speak of chain is a linear arrangement. Just like any chains are fixed in a linear format, they kind of in a linear format where they rigidly follow the chain of command. So any hierarchy that calls for rule of command or a chain of command, it's a very linear kind of setup. Second is a wheel. Now, what does wheel communication happens, or what format? It relies on a central figure to act as a conduit for all communication. That means in a wheel, just like a cycle wheel, it has a center command, and from where all the spokes are connected, and the spokes are communication. But a center person is the person in command or the group in command, we can call it. The team with a stronger leader becomes the center point of that field. Third is all channel. What happens in all channel? All group members communicate actively with each other. So there is no defined set of rules that communication has to go this way or that way. It could happen anyways. They generally exist in self-managed teams where the team organization or the structure is not very well defined as well. They are more plasma or plastic in nature. Small group networks effectiveness. We'll look into the effectiveness of communication in each of these structures. Now, on one side, we have taken the criteria. So we'll look into each of these criteria, right from speed of communication we are referring to, speed, accuracy of communication, emergence of leader as well, and member satisfaction. And we are also looking on the other end, the three channels that we spoke about. One, the chain, two, the wheel, and the third, all channels. So if you see speed, when we are looking at speed, the speed becomes very fast in a wheel and a all channel. They are fast. In a chain, it's moderate because it's linear. It takes time to disperse the information from one level to the another, and that's the reason speed is cut off. Accuracy. Now, in a chain and a wheel, they have very high accuracy because it's direct as well. In all channel, since they are coming from multiple levels as well, they are moderate as far as accuracy is concerned. We look into emergence of a leader. In a wheel, it is very clear the emergence of a leader is the center point, and that becomes very high. All channel, none is a leader because here they are kind of self-managed teams. In a chain, they are moderate. If you see member satisfaction, since satisfaction is one of the element we discussed in a past session for high performance. Now, for member satisfaction, we are looking from an individual perspective of behavior. We see that the all channel factor is very high for the simple reason that here his identity is restored. He's more in line with things. So with different types of networks, we find these kind of changes also happening as well. Great. Now the grapevine. Now grapevine is an interesting part of organizational communication. Now grapevine is an informal communication which exists but not really in the right sense. It could be a rumor, it could be a gossip, any of those. Rumor is a very classical representation for grapevine. Now tell me, if you are working for any organization or if you have worked for any organization, you will find the grapevine to exist very well. If you see the three main grapevine characteristics are, number one, they are informal. They are not controlled by management because rumors are not. They are perceived by most employees as being more believable and reliable than formal communication. They say rumors spread fast and people believe also rumors very fast as well. Largely it is used to serve the self-interest of those who use it. So people sometimes purposefully spread rumors as well because they know it spreads like fire. The results from, now what are the causes of grapevine? Desire for information about important issues. It could be ambiguous condition where conditions are not clear. They are kind of very ambiguous, very cloudy or muggy, or condition that cause anxiety. So people are anxious about things. These are situations when rumors are very predominant and insightful to managers as well. Now, any grapevine gives in a lot and lots of information to the manager, because those informations are very critical as well, and serves employees' social needs as well, where people they're kind of ventilation for emotional thresholds as well. Reducing rumor. We know that not all rumors are helpful and majority are not. So from a manager's implication perspective, or from a manager perspective, how can we reduce rumors? We can reduce rumor by announcing timetables for making important decisions. So this can reduce an anxiety, because sometimes when people are not clear when the communication is going to happen or what would be the source of communication, then that's the time that grapevine becomes very predominant, or rumors becomes predominant. So if you can schedule it with timetables, people know this is the time the information is to come. Explain decisions and behaviors that may appear inconsistent or secretive. Now, this is part of leadership and manage, and a good leadership and a good manager very clears of certain things. That means he's more transparent in his approach. He kind of clears the air, and hence gives no or less room to grapevine. He emphasizes the downside as well as the upside of the current decisions and future plans. So as the manager is communicating to the team members of any particular decision, he clarifies the pluses, the minuses of the decision with the team members as well. So there is no chance of misrepresentation or misinterpretation of the communication as well. He openly discussed worst case possibilities as well, where there are almost never as anxious provoking or unspoken fantasies. So when any decisions are made, when any changes are being made, people see to it that managers address these questions like, okay, what's the worst case scenario? What will happen in the max? What's the worst that could happen? So these questions reduces employees to think and fantasize on the negative cloud. They kind of look into more tangible things. They're kind of looking at clearly as well about how things could go wrong if it can. So it kind of reduces the anxiety as well. It reduces rumor. And then we are looking at electronic communication as well. The email communication, as it is called, E standing for electronic. Now all business communication email has become a norm, and when we say norm, it has become a legal document as well, where people trust this kind of communication, because there are so many available communications. There are communications of messages, of WhatsApp, of so many communication. But this is a very standard communication that all organization had stood by. Advantages of email are it is quickly written, sent and stored with low cost of distribution as well. Disadvantages, if you see from an email perspective, which we need to look in as well, are: 1. Messages are easily and commonly misinterpreted. So since they are written communication, there are chances that different words can mean different things, and they could be misrepresented about it. They always say the best way where this misrepresentation or misinterpretation could be reduced is the oral and the physical communication, where it's one-to-one. Those are the cases where the chance of miscommunication are least. With email communication, the disadvantage also could be not appropriate for sending negative messages. So if you want to express or ventilate out your emotions, this is not a medium or a channel to use it. Overused and overloading readers. Sometimes, if you see in organizational context, uh, there exists where groups are formed, for intra-groups are formed within the company as well, where they kind of made it into groups. Now, certain times, not all emails are relevant to all, and if people are not able to use whom to mark, whom to not mark, whom to put in CC and BCC, this might go for a toss, because then you keep on receiving emails which are not really relevant from your context, and this becomes a noise in communication. We've discussed noise which are barriers. That means that within your work schedule, if you're spending some amount of time in even reading those mails which are not relevant to you, they are time wasters, isn't it? Yes. Removes inhibition and cause emotional responses and flaming as well. So there is a chance that because of misinterpretation or representation, this could really turn up anywhere as well. Difficult to get emotional state understood. Now, any emotion that you are going to deal with on email, it is not recommended. Even the happy moments or not so happy ones as well. It is never recommended that you express your emotions on email. In fact, it is said that if a particular subject gets carried over 3 times over on the email, it's better to call up, because a lot of time the written communication can cause misinterpretation of the message. So if a particular message is being transferred here and there between two individuals, in terms of understanding, it's better that they call up, because it's the best way, the oral communication, the best way to clear off any barriers. And also this gives the feedback as well. Non-primitive, that means email is often monitored and may be forwarded to anyone. So that's also a disadvantage, where if we don't want certain people in the loop, even those could be marked as well in email, which sometimes might not be in with good taste or with good flavor, and which people might not really appreciate how things are going. This about email. Then the electronic communication, the text messages. Now text messages has been in the industry for the last around 20-25 years or so, as we messages of SMS, to call it, the short service message. It is a form of real-time communication of short messages that often use portable communication devices. So you need a mobile to use this, as we all know it. The characteristics involved are: number one, explosive growth in business use. So any kind of communication that is used, this has been widely used. Two, fast and inexpensive means of communication. So any short messages, if you want to deliver, is a very fast one as well. It can be intrusive and destructive. Now, since short service messages are also a part of marketing tool for many companies as well, there is quite a chance that it could be distracting and also easily hacked, because security levels are not very high. Can be seen as too informal as well, and because email are thought to be a very formal mode of communication. Instant messaging is immediate email sent to receiver's desktop or device. The text messages are short messages typically sent to cell phones or other handled devices. The networking software. So now we have seen one, the email, the two, the SMSs, and the third we will look into is the networking softwares. What are those? Wherein it's a linked services. organically spread throughout the nation world that could be accessed by a PC. When we call of social networks available, be it WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter, Skype, now all these they require an app to do it. It includes social networks like MySpace, Facebook, and so forth. Many of those professional networks also in this category called the Zoom Info and the Zig. And we also have corporate networks like IBM's Blue Pages. Or the key points, if you see, as far as social networks are concerned, these are public spaces. That means anyone can see what you post because they're kind of shared across. Can be used for job application screening. So a lot of job portals are available, right from Monster, Jobs Ahead, First Step, and so on and so forth, Shine. Avoid overstimulation your contact. So since they are kind of social platform, it so happens that people are kind of glued in to either the handset or the app, and there is a chance that if you are not able to judiciously use this, we might get hooked onto it, and that's a big time disadvantage. They say that our mobile phones have become smart. It is said that our mobile phones have become smart, but the question is, have we become smart? That's something that we need to look on. We can only become smart as far as mobile phones or handsets or desktops are concerned till the point we are using that, we are smart. But if those things, gadgets, apps have started using us, then that is smart, not us. So intelligence also says that you should have, when we were speaking yesterday of conscientiousness, it means that it's about discretion and intelligence to use what, when, where. The other one is blogs and video conferencing, wherein what are blogs? They are websites about a single person or entity or a group that are typically updated daily, wherein a popular but potentially dangerous activity. Employees may post harmful information, sometimes not with good taste, sometimes with things that might not be legally approved as well. Such comments may be cause for dismissal as well, because it might not go with the organizational goals. No First Amendment right protection as well. Can be against company policy to post in the blog during company time or along with company equipment. So a lot of companies have made a rule these days that they should not and cannot allow mobiles during the work time. They can only check in their post only during breaks. Otherwise, they are not allowed to. The video conferencing uses live audio and video internet streaming to create virtual meetings as well. Now uses inexpensive webcams and laptops in place of formal video conferencing rooms. We know that we are living in an electronic age where when we speak of meetings have also become virtual because teams have become virtual, because companies have become transnational companies where decisions are made across the globe and decisions are also made in an instant as well, wherein they are connected. Either they discuss things on a video conference, they make decisions through a video conference, they deliver key messages during a video conference, education happens through a video conference, just like this medium that is happening. It's through a video, isn't it? And so very important to understand the power of this video, because although I am based in Mumbai, but I'm kind of relating to you across the globe, and there's so very powerful connect. maybe 20 years back, 30 years back, this was a distant dream, isn't it? This medium of education also has happened through this medium of communication, of video conferencing. The knowledge management. Now, knowledge management, we are speaking of communication. Within communication, the reason being, let's understand what is first knowledge management. It is a process of organizing and distributing an organization collective wisdom. So the right information gets the right people at the right time. Now, they say an organization is an entity, is a creature in itself. Now, since we know that organizations are made of individuals, groups and teams, and each of these individuals and teams have that set of knowledge base or intelligence. When they all group together and come together, they need to pull in and also need to dissipate or disperse that information based on whom to give, how much to give, when to give and where to give. This is important. It is important because intellectual assets are as critical as physical assets. During the Industrial Revolution, physical assets were important. So when we are going through the Industrial Revolution of 16th to 18th century or so, physical assets were important. Machinery was important. The factory infra was important. But today, it's beyond that as well. Here, intellectual assets and that assets are important. And that's the reason these days more is spoken about patents, about registration of patents, about intellectual intelligence being intellectual details or intellectual rights to a particular product or a formula for that matter. When individuals leave, now this is important, students, please look into this. When individuals leave, their knowledge and experience go with them, and that's a big time threat for any individual or any company. Now, even if an individual leaves, the knowledge should not go along with him. He might go with his own set of knowledge, but a company's knowledge exists in a data bank because we are living in an age of electronic revolution and knowledge revolution as well. A KM system, that is a knowledge management system, reduces redundancy and makes the organization more efficient. That means the organization wants the knowledge should be there with itself, so that it doesn't become redundant. It requires an organization culture that values sharing of information. Now, when we are living in an era of electronic revolution, it's so very important to understand, and this is a cultural frame and it depends on the culture of the company. Some company operates from a frame of mind or the belief system or the thought that we are living in an area of abundance. Now, having the mindset or an attitude of abundance is so very important. What does abundance mean? Abundance means for every person there lies opportunities for growth. For every person they can grow. And the opposite of this is frame of scarcity or lessness. Means, in other words, it means if I need to grow, somebody needs to come down. And that mindset really doesn't help the organization to grow. So it is a cultural frame, that the frame saying that we live in an era of abundance. That means for everybody there exists opportunities to grow, to explore, to expand, to evolve. It is not a zero-sum game where somebody's gain has to come from somebody's loss. We all can gain together, and that's a cultural frame. Now, to have a good knowledge sharing between all individuals, this frame of abundance is so very important. The choice of channel. Now, we'll also look into how the channel choices could be made. where the model of media richness helps explain an individual's choice of communication channel. Now, on what basis we can decide on which channel are we going for? The channels vary in their capacity to convey information. Now, any channel is selected based on content, context, speed, importance, various variables. So for example, let's take a simple example of content. If it is a large content of information to be shared or to be communicated, we can't select a short service messages, isn't it? It has to be an email in that context. When we want a very high, urgent and important things to be discussed, it cannot be email. It has to be a one-on-one communication or a meeting or a brainstorming. The rich channel is the one which can handle multiple clues simultaneously. So when we speak of a rich channel of communication, it means that it can handle many attributes together. It facilitates rapid feedback as well. In communication, friends, feedbacks are important. If feedbacks are not there, it's not a one-way communication is never a one-way process. So it's always said in other words as well, the communication is the feedback that you receive. That means what I have communicated to you is based on the feedback that I receive, and that's the reason I always end up all my sessions by asking you to send an email to us in terms of feedback. Now, feedback could be a question, could be any of those. So this is a feedback. Be very personal as well. So because personal, we want to give attention to individuals as well. Choice depends on whether the message is routine. So it depends on, is it routine messages, important messages, not so important messages, urgent messages, not so urgent messages. High performing managers tend to be very media sensitive. They say that successful leaders are very choosy on which type of channel to select to send messages. So we will also look into now the barriers that to effective communication. So when we are looking at effective communication, there are certain barriers. Barriers means the blockages that blocks the information which is passed on from the sender to the receiver. Now, one, it could be filtering. Now, what does filtering mean? Filtering is the sender's manipulation of the information so that it will be seen more favorably by the receiver. Filtering is, let me tell you students that when a person is communicating, our human brain can only process, they say, 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information. That is, our conscious brain can process 5 to 9 bits of information only. But there are lots of bits of information that goes unconsciously as well. So if you want to filter it out as well, we look into the sensory channels as well. That means visual, auditory and kinesthetic. We are kind of aware of the filtering channels. The selective perception. Now perception is so very important that a lot of people have this feeling about already, always. Some people, for example, have a belief system that he is always this way, she is always this way, he or she can't change. Now friends, understand, we all change. In fact, our bodies also change as well, the physical bodies I'm saying. Every cell of our body that existed 7 years back and now are different, maybe except for few brain cells which are same. But 97% of our body which existed 5 to 7 years back has changed. so does our beliefs as well, our thoughts as well, our behaviors as well. So the point is, so when people perceive somebody in a certain context, it's not very helpful. And that's the reason we always say, whenever you're meeting a person after some time, for a fresh discussion, for a fresh kind of input, always press the F5 button. Now what's the F5 button? Refresh. Because we are looking at it from a blank screen. We are looking at it from a very open-mindedness. This is important. So when we speak of perception, people selectively interpret what they see on the basis of their interest, background, experience, and attributes. The information overload. Sometimes the data gets too much. When a condition in which information inflows exceeds an individual processing capacity. That means so much of unwanted information is given that people can't handle it. So we here always recommend for relevancy of information. Emotions. Now how a receiver feels at the time a message is received will influence how the message is interpreted. That means what kind of mood the person is, what kind of emotion the person is, also influences how he is going to take the message. For example, if you are cracking a joke and if a person is in a light mood, a happy mood, he will kind of take it very positively, and he will be very participative in it as well. But suppose if the person is had a rough day, if he's kind of irritable and frustrated through a chain or sequence of events of the day that has passed by him, the joke might not go well with him. In fact, he might take this personally as well, that this is like adding salt to the wound. It might be that way as well. So it depends on the mood as well. Other barriers are language. Now, when people change language, because every language has set of words that are used. Now, words have different meanings to different people. For example, the meaning of success I give to myself and what you give to yourself are two different words. So, victory for you might be different. Victory for me would be very different. So, words can distort the meaning as well. Communication apprehension means undue tension and anxiety about oral communication, written communication, or both. Sometimes people are very anxious. Means anxiety is a mood, isn't it? It's a part of emotion. Even when they're anxious about it, they really change the communication itself. The effectiveness of communication is lost. They might want to say something, but actually they say something else only, and that changes the communication as well. It could be the gender differences, where men tend to talk to empathize status, whereas women tend to create connection. So women are more sympathetic in nature, whereas men take it more from a cognitive and understanding perspective or empathetic perspective. So two different approaches as well, where communicating with women is at a different level altogether, where a woman looks into more for relatedness, bonding, sharing. Men look at more objectively as well. They separate the emotions from the dealing as well. PC communication, more commonly called in organization, or politically correct communication. Now, what is this politically correct communication? Now, the communication so concerned with being inoffensive that meaning and simplicity are lost or free expression is hampered. A lot of time, you might have seen that certain people are straight, they're kind of blunt. They say a crook, direct face on. They don't kind of change it. They tell a spade a spade. That means They are very direct, they are very straight. But politically correct communication is where people modify that speed. They kind of round off, they kind of sugarcoat it, wherein it sounds good. It also kind of, mellows down the intensity of the emotions as well. They're kind of diplomatic about their language. So certain words do stereotype, they intimidate and insult. In a highly diverse workforce, this is problematic. For example, garbage is a very crude way to express, but politically correct becomes post-consumer waste material. Crude way, quotas, politically correct language, educational equity. Woman becomes people of gender. Now, such non-standard sanitizing of potentially offensive words can reduce the clarity of message. Sometimes, for example, when feedbacks of performance need to be given, or when feedbacks of results need to be given, in that context, the PC communication is not going to help. There is no need to sugarcoat it. There is no need to change the words, because there it needs to be clear, straight, factual information. It might sound rough to start off, but you're clear about your communication. So PC communication there, it doesn't work. It has to be straight and clear. The global implication of communication. Cross-cultural factors increases communication difficulties. The cultural barriers are semantics, where some words aren't transferable. Certain countries, certain words doesn't exist only. For example, there's an African tribe wherein there is no word for them for lies. And the reality is, for them, they don't say lies. So sometimes we represent the actual fact with some words. So words, semantic. It could be a word connotation where some words imply multiple meanings beyond their definition. It is not that a single word has to mean one thing. It will have multiple meanings as well. It could be the tone difference, wherein the acceptable level of formality of language. Now, high volume, for example, consistently, is considered to be arrogant, or low volume is considered to be a sign of low confidence. Yes or no? Yes. It could be perception differences where language affects the worldview. Now, sometimes when people don't speak in English, it's considered to be outdated form. So people can have an opinion about it. So when cricket matches finish and man of the matches award are given, some Asian players who are not very aware about the language of English, they tend to speak in the local language, which sometimes people can't perceive it, and they think and connect abilities with language, and that's a perception block. It may not be correct. The cultural context, the importance of social context to meaning. The low context cultures, especially the Western, rely on words for meaning. They look into for the actual words. The high context cultures gain meaning from the whole situation. Like all the Asian countries are the high context situations. Body language is used as well, which could be very ambiguous, which need not necessarily has to be clear of whatever is being said. A cultural guide. So if you see, to reduce our chance of making a fox pass or an error in other culture, or certain caution that could be taken are: number one, assuming differences until similarity is proven. So we assume that people are different, they have their own mindset about it, and that's okay to be different. As we always say, never compare an apple with a mango, or All five fingers are different, and it's okay to be different. Emphasizing description rather than interpretation or evaluation. So whenever a word or a sentence or a phrase is said, it is better to get clarified. Always ask, okay, what does it mean to you? What else does it say? Can you put in some other words? Can you describe more? Can you tell more about it? Can you emphasize it a bit more? So by gaining or seeking more clarity about it, we come to a similar level of understanding on the topic. Practicing empathy in communication is so very important. So empathizing in communication requires great listening skills, because a lot of time when we are speaking of listening, say for example, a lot of time when we are listening, we tend to think about what need to say. Now if we are doing that, tell me, what would be the quality of listening? Would it go up or come down? It obviously will come down, because we are already thinking what to say. So when we are listening as well, when we speak of empathetic listening, it means we are non-judgmental about things. We kind of open about it. We listen and observe people very well. We look at the tonality shifts as well. We look at the body language as well. And we take communication in totality rather than just going with an aspect of words. Treating your interpretations as working hypothesis. Now, when any person speaks, there are a lot of assumptions attached. Even when doing a course of MBA or teaching a course of MBA, there are a lot of assumptions attached. When Newton was telling his all three laws, there are assumptions involved. So there are assumptions involved as well. So we need to understand that these are assumptions that we need to account in. Now, looking from the entire aspect of communication, if you want to look the managerial implications are, the less employees are uncertain, the greater satisfaction good communication reduces uncertainty. The point is, if you have good communication, it reduces ambiguity, it reduces disclarity. Communication is improved by choosing the correct channel, being a good listener, as we spoke about, giving feedback to communication, the sender. Potential for misunderstanding in electronic communication is higher than the traditional modes of communication. And there are many barriers to international communication that must be overcome, because there are cultural sentiments about it. So what we have done in the last 45 minutes or 50 minutes or so is we have defined what communication is. We told that it's a transference of meaning. We told what are the various types of communication, the formal, informal ones. We have looked into the channels of communications, right from the verbal, non-verbal communication, and the channels that includes the email, the short service message, the video conferencing, the electronic messages. We have also seen the process of communication from the sender to the receiver, and we have also seen the barriers that exist in communication and what are the implications the manager has or looks into when he's looking at the entire process of communication. Great. This was about communication. Now what we will do is we will look into the second aspect of our model, or second aspect of our session, and that's something that it's world over spoken about, it's exercised, and that's about leadership. A word that is very synonymous, where a lot of books are written, a lot of videos are there. So we're looking from an organizational behavior what leadership means. So what are we going to do in this coming 45 minutes or so would be define leadership and compare leadership and management, assess theories of leadership and the levels of support. We will compare charismatic and transformational leadership. We'll define authentic leadership and show why effective leaders exemplify ethics and trust, and demonstrate the role mentoring plays in our understanding of leadership. We'll also discuss the coaching and mentoring role of leadership and address challenges to the effectiveness of leadership as well. Great. So what is leadership? Let's start with a simple definition. It is the ability to influence a group towards a desired outcome or goal. So when we are looking at leadership, it is the ability to influence for a desired organizational goal. And if you want to define management as against leadership, it is a use of authority inherent in a designated formal rank to obtain compliance from organization members, where there is a use of authority so that each individual member of the organization complies by to the design of the organization. Now both are necessary for organizational success, both leadership and management. Now we look into a few theories of leadership which are important. Now theories that consider personality, social, physical or intellectual traits to differentiate leaders from non-leaders comes under the trait theory. Trait means what are the features, attributes. So attributes could be personality, social attributes. They are differentiated from the leaders and non-leaders. Not very useful until matched with the Big Five personality framework. We have to, when we are looking at trait theory, we have to match it up with other theories as well to look into better into this context. The essential leadership traits. Now, when we are speaking of, since we are speaking of trait theory, now in this theory, certain traits which were very commonly seen in leaders are, they were extroversion. That means they are generally spoke well. They're tending towards outspokenness than introversion. They don't restrict maybe the communication with themselves. They kind of speak up. They're extrovert. They are conscientiousness, means they have high values and ethics about it. Their conscience is very well evolved as well, and that requires great amount of awareness. Their openness to change, their openness to listen, their openness to have difference of opinion, and their EI, they're emotionally intelligent, as we discussed with Daniel Goleman's coined word of emotional intelligence. They are very much self-aware of their emotions. They manage themselves well, and they also understand emotions of others as well, and they manage others' emotions as well, because that's also part to influence. So traits can actually predict leadership, but they are better at predicting leader emergence than effectiveness. So when we speak about trait theory, where certain behavioral traits are seen, it is good from an aspect of when the group is in a forming and a norming stage. We can find who is emerging as a leader. Maybe on that front, that's good. But when we are looking at effectiveness of a leader, that means how the leader is going to be effective, the trait theory might not give some great insights. Behavioral theories of leadership. Now, what are certain behavioral theories of leadership is what we will look into as well, wherein the theories proposing that specific behaviors differentiate leaders from non-leaders. So traits are the attributes. Now behavior are the actual behaviors. The differences between theories of leadership are, in trait theory, the leadership is inherent. That means it's inborn. So we must identify the leaders based on his or her traits. Whereas in behavioral theory, the leadership is a skill set and can be taught to anyone. So we must identify the proper behaviors to teach potential leaders. So when we speak of trait theory, one of the belief system is leaders are born. Whereas in behavioral theory, we represent that leaders can be taught or leaders can be made because behaviors could be taught. Now, importance of behavioral studies come from two aspects. One, studies from Ohio and Michigan. Ohio, it is about initiating structure and consideration, whereas in Michigan, it's about employee orientation and production orientation. So, two aspects. One, look at the organizational structure, and the second is more about people relatedness and results. Let's look into this. The third aspect of theory is the contingency theory. What are contingency theories? Now, while trait and behavioral theories do help us understand leadership, an important component is missing, and that missing element is the environment in which the leader exists. So, when we are speaking of leadership, we are not looking at the individual standalone. We are looking at how the individual behaves and responds to the environment as well, because the environment is changing as well. Where contingency theory adds this additional aspect to our understanding leadership effectiveness studies as well. Wherein TK theories, in the contingency theory, we takes into consideration the external environment as well, are number one, the Fiedler's model, two, the Hersey's and Blanchard situational theory, and the path goal theory. And we'll be addressing these and understanding these contingency theory as well. One, the Fiedler's model, two, the Hersey's and the Blanchard situational leadership theory, and third, the path goal theory. Let's take it one by one. The Fiedler's model. What does Fiedler's model understand? Till now, we have defined leadership. We have also understood the difference between leadership and management, and we mentioned that both are important. Then we are looking now at types of leadership theory. One, the trait theory, that means based on attributes, which has a belief system and assumption that leaders are born. Second is a behavioral theory, where we discuss that behaviors make leaders and behaviors are taught, and hence leaders could be made. Third aspect is the contingency theory. We mentioned that contingency theory takes into account aspects of external environment that influences people as well. So that then comes the contingency theory. And contingency theory, we are going to look into three theories. One, the Fiedler's model, two, the path goal theory, and the situational theory. In Fiedler's model, it is effective group performance depends on the proper match between leadership style and the degree to which the situation gives the leader control. Two aspects. One, the leadership style about it, one, and two, what kind of control delegation he has to the environment. Now, it assumes that leadership style is fixed. It considers three situational factors. So when Fiedler mentioned about this model, it mentioned the three situational styles. and those are leader-member relations. That means degree of confidence and trust in the leader. Two, the task structure, wherein the degree of structure in the job, they're more defined in the job. And third, the position power, wherein leaders' ability to hire, fire, and reward is the Fiedler's model. So it assumes that leadership has a particular style and it is fixed, and the situational factors of trust, the structure of the job, and the position power. Now, if you want the graphical representation of the Fiedler model, if you see over here, on the y-axis, the performance is plotted over here, poor to good, and here, on this axis, we are looking at the factors that are favorable, that is the external factors, favorable, moderate, unfavorable. Now, if these two are plotted, the dotted line representation is the task orientation or the result orientation, and the relationship is a thick line which is represented over here. So if you see performance is poor when favorable condition exists with a relationship orientation high on task, means the performance, if you see, for task orientation is good, but relationship is poor in favorable condition, and it changes the direction when the moderate situational factors come in, wherein the task orientation comes down in moderate atmosphere, relationship goes up, still goes in reverse in unfavorable situation. When the external situations are not great, then the relationship goes for a toss, the task comes up. And you see the three external factors, the leader-member relationship, task structure, and position power. If you see, in these categories, 1 to, in fact, 4, the leader-member relationship is good. But from where on, where external situation changes, they are poor. If you say task structure, which is high, then becomes low, and then again goes high. Position of power, it is alternatively weak and strong in the entire journey of task orientation and relationship orientation. Now, we look into also the Fiedler's cognitive resource theory. It says that the refinement of Fiedler's original model, that means that it focuses on stress as the enemy of rationality and creator of unfavorable conditions as well. A leader's intelligence and experience influences his or her reaction to the stress. For example, is the stress level. There are two variables, high and low. Intelligence effect, ability, it could be effective or ineffective, and the leader's experience, effective and ineffective. So what Fiedler's cognitive resource theory is that these three levels influences results and relationships both. Assessment, if you're looking at the positives, what Fiedler model gives us are, there is a considerable evidence support the model, especially if the original 8 situations are grouped into 3. So if you see the logic behind the Fiedler's model, scale is not well understood. Now the scores are not stable from this model, and the contingency variables are complex. When we say of external factors, they can't be put down into tangible numbers. So hence kind of really difficult to evaluate as well. Now after the Fiedler's model, there is a Blanchard model of situational leadership, which is a leadership model which is kind of used in many organizations. Now when we speak of situational leadership, it is a model that focuses on followers' readiness. That means that followers can accept or reject a leader as well. The effectiveness depends on followers' response to leaders' reaction. For example, ability to follow. If they're unable, the willingness will be unwilling. If they're unable, they're willing, but display high task orientation. They're able yet unwilling. The reason the leadership behavior is use a supportive and participatory style. Ability to follow is able, they are willing as well, doesn't need to do much, they need to delegate over here. So when we speak of leadership styles in situational leadership, now it could be directive, it could be delegative, it could be autocratic, or it could be collaborative or cooperative. Now, what situational leadership says is that we need to do all of those. So we cannot be only autocratic or only collaborative or only cooperative. We need to kind of do all kind of this in different contexts, and that's so very important. Then is the path goal theory. The houses path goal theory. It builds from the OEO state and from the expectancy theory of motivation. That if you want good results, expect good results. The theory says that leaders provide followers with information, support, and resources to help them achieve their goals. So the leaders give all these resources. Leaders help clarify the path to the workers' goals. Means they clear up the disturbance. They kind of enlighten and enrich the journey as well. Leaders can display multiple leadership styles here as well. 4 types of leaders evolve from it. 1, the directive. That means they focus on the work to be done. They are very much task oriented. Second, the supportive, where it's focused on the well-being of the worker. They are more relationship based. Third, participative. Here, consult with employees in decision making. So for any decision making, they kind of discuss it out as well. Or achievement orientation, where they set challenging goals. Now, path goal theory divides this leadership style into 4 styles. 1, directive, supportive, participative, and achievement oriented style as well. The the other style that we'll discuss is Vroom's and Yetton's leadership participation model. Now, what does it say? It is how a leader makes decisions as important of what is decided, wherein the premises or the assumption is that situational variables interact with leadership attributes to impact the behavior of the leader. That means there are a lot of external factors that kind of influences the leader's behavior as well, where leader's behavior must adjust to the ways tasks are structured in the organization. This is a normative model that tells leaders how participation in their own decision making in a decision tree. 5 leadership styles evolve and 12 contingency variables. That means here it definitely assumes that it could be a situational leadership, but it has to be based on the goals to be achieved as well. So the LMX theory or the leader-member exchange theory. Here, inner group members are similar to leader. In leader's inner circle of communication, receives more time and attention with the leader. Out groups are managed by formal rules and policies, receive less of leader attention, fewer exchanges, and more likely to retaliate against the organization. So LMX theory focuses on organizations which are more shorter in size. They are more kind of self-managed teams as well. The leader-member exchange. The other is a charismatic leadership. Charismatic is the charisma that a person has. Charisma means gift in Greek. So it is about the vision, it's about personal risk, it's about sensitivity to followers, and generally very unconventional in approach. So when we speak of charismatic leadership, how do charismatic leaders influence followers? The model is one, they articulate a vision, they draft a vision, they create a vision statement, they create new sets of values in line with vision statement, and they demonstrate their vision. The other is the transformational leader. So one is a charismatic leader, the other is transformational leader. The transformational leader inspire followers to transcend from their self-interest for the good of the organization. So charismatic leaders are more related to the self. It means their entire persona kind of exemplifies leadership. But when we speak of transformational leadership, it's about going beyond the persona, going beyond it for the common good. So when you say the difference we want to put in between transactional and transformational, it means that in a transactional mode, it is a contingent reward. That means you do good, you get reward for it. The management by exception both in active and passive, and laissez-faire, there is a kind of freedom about it. Whereas in transformational, it is idealized influence, a lot of influence about it. Inspirational motivation as well, there's a lot of motivational drives involved. Intellectual stimulation, so when a transformational leader interact with his group, he's very stimulating, not only emotionally, he kind of able to move people around, and there's also logic behind it. So it's not only about emotions, but also with a logic involved of why to do a task, and also individualized consideration as well. So we are looked into the transactional leadership and the transformational, where transactional leadership means going exactly by what the defined norms of the organization. They are very particular about things. They follow every bit by bit of the process or the SOP of the company. But in transformational, it's about going beyond. It's about motivating people. It's about infusing people with power. It's about giving logic, creating a vision as well. So when we speak of the differences between these two, they are laissez-faire. Laissez-faire means free flow of information. In transformational, they are individualized consideration as well. Here it is management by exception, means only certain things will be considered, whereas here it is intellectual stimulation. Here it is contingent reward, whereas here it is inspirational motivation, and idealized influence as well is what we look into as far as the differences between these two are considered. We'll also look into the authentic leaders and the ethic and leadership. Now, what are authentic leaders? Now, authentic leaders are known who they are, what they believe in and value, and act upon those values and beliefs. Now, when we speak of authentic leaders, it's a lot about the individual's beliefs and values. We speak of a lot of moral values and ethics as well. It's also about walking the talk as well. And the ethics and leadership. Now, what does ethics and leadership here mean? It means leadership is not free from values. When we assess leadership, we must assess not just the goals themselves, but also the means by which these goals are achieved. So we are not only involved in end results. So they say it's not just about the end results as well, but we are looking at the processes involved as well. So what are the stages involved to achieve those end results? Is the ethics about it. So it's not just about getting results hook or by crook. It's about achieving the means to achieve the ends also are important as well. Trust in leadership. They say that trust is a psychological state and exists when you agree to make yourself vulnerable to another because you have a positive expectation from how things are going to turn out. Now, trust could be vulnerable because you trust kind of people. You know that it can backfire you, but in spite of that, you go ahead and trust people. Key attribute associated with leadership, with trust leadership, followers who trust the leader will align their actions and attitudes with the leader's behaviors and requests as well. Wherein the trust, the desired actions are there and the desired attitudes are there as well. So how is trust developed? It starts with leadership, with integrity, benevolence and ability, trust, and then action of risk taking by walking the talk as well. The other aspect of current leadership when we speak about is about mentoring or leading for the future. A mentor is a senior employee who supports a less experienced employee, wherein the career functions are to help the person gain skills and abilities. It is lobbying for that particular person for better assignments. It's providing exposure to influential group of people. It's about acting as a sounding board. They kind of mirror that person. The psychological functions involved in mentoring are counseling the person for his confidence, sharing personal experiences or success stories, providing friendship and acceptance, and acting as a role model. So very important. So mentoring, a lot of companies these days provide mentors to the new inductees or new joinees. Now these new mentors need not, they are generally from cross-functional teams, could be managers from other teams who kind of guide them, support them as well. Now finding and creating effective leaders being first selecting them with the right potential and then obviously training them based on the needs as well. Managerial implication when we speak of leadership, it is central understanding it gives when you speak of group behavior. Extroversion, consciousness and openness all show consistent relationship to leadership. Behavioral approach has narrowed leadership down to unusable dimensions. Need to take into account the situational variables, especially the impact on followers. Research in charismatic and transformational leadership has major contribution to understanding of leadership. Leaders must be seen as authentic and trustworthy. Investment must be made in the future through mentoring and training leaders as well. Other implications that the manager can take from this session. Great. We come to a third aspect of our session, which will spend around 10-15 minutes of our time on power and politics. When a group of people come together, it's very clear there will always be a tussle that will exist as far as power and politics are concerned. So what is power? Let's understand a few aspects about it. So what is power? Now power is the capacity that A has to influence the behavior of B so that B acts in accordance with A's wishes. That is power, isn't it? Power of influence. Now the definition implies a potential that needs not to be actualized to be effective and dependency relationship. Power may exist but not to be used. It is therefore a capacity or potential. So when we say power, we say that the power is the capacity to influence the person or a group, but need not necessarily the person has to use it. So it is always mentioned power is a potential. Now certain times it is not obvious, but it acts unconsciously. For example, certain designations, when they speak to us, they are unconsciously exerting their power. And that's so very important when we are understanding organizational behavior, dealing with groups as well, the role of power. contrasting leadership and power. So we will look into from this perspective, since we are discussing leadership as well, how are they kind of matching up each other. So leaders achieve goals, and power is a means of facilitating the achievement. Since we mentioned that through power we can influence, so that means it's a means to do it. Leadership involves the goals of the leaders and followers. Power does not. Leadership focuses on downward influence. Leader subordinate. Power does not have this kind of orientation. Power could be upside down or downside up as well. Now, basis of power. Now, what are the base of power when we speak of leadership? It could be one, the coercive power, wherein the power base depends on fear, fear of designation, fear of hierarchy, fear of executive power. So it will be coercive power, or it could be reward power. Reward power, the compliance achieved based on the ability to distribute rewards that other views are valuable. For example, the immediate manager has the power to appraise you in terms of compensation packages, or also for elevation as well. So that power as well. The basis of power are one, legitimate power. It means that the power of a person receives the result of his or her position in a formal hierarchy of organization. So we are speaking of legitimate power where the organization itself has given certain powers to some people as well. So that itself is power. It could be personal power. While it could be legitimate power, it could be personal power. Now what are the personal powers? One, the information power. The power that comes from access and control to information. Some people, for example, if you go higher up the hierarchy in an organization, you can access critical information. Now, is information power? Yes, it is. So it could be information power, or it could be expert power. Now, one thing I just want to tell you as far as information power does not necessarily mean the person has to be in the top rank. It could be as well, yes, but it not necessarily be. For example, a secretary to the CEO of the organization. Has the secretary got more chances of having more information? Yes. And hence more power? Yes. Expert power. Now what is expert power? Expert power is the influence based on special skills on knowledge. For example, some people are masters in their own zone because they have done it many times over. They are skilled at a particular niche band or segment, wherein if a certain thing goes wrong, only he or she could do it. Now that's an expert power, expert knowledge. Now is that power as well? Yes, because that's added value which nobody else can do or very few can do. That's power as well. So it could be information power, expert power. It could be referent power. Now what does referent power mean? Here the influence is based on possession by an individual of desirable resources or personal traits. Now it could be based on the kind of contacts the person has, of a particular group has. That's also referent power. It could be the charismatic powers, wherein an extension of referent power, it is a kind of referent power where the power is due to the persona, the personality that the person carries. It could be the height, it could be the weight, it could be the complexion, it could be the build, it could be the communication, any of those. It could be the persona as such. And does that give power? I bet it does. Now, dependency. Now, we have spoken about, what we have done till now is we have defined what is power. We have also looked into the various types of power. We'll also look into the dependency as well. Now, how much a leader should depend on power to execute the functions, and that's an important area from an organizational behavior perspective. So, the general dependency postulate says that the greater B dependence on A, the greater power A has over B. Now, students need to understand, we cannot say that power between two people exists or doesn't exist. It's also about the intensity as well. So the more power one person exerts over the other, the more dependent he or she becomes. What creates dependency? One, importance. Importance of the resource of the organization. He might be accessing to some good resource. Scarcity of the resource. Now, does scarcity adds value? It does. Or non-substitutable resource means that resource or that value of resource you cannot substitute by something else, because that is very niche. So what creates this dependency? It could be importance, scarcity, or non-substitutability of the resource. The power tactics. Now, since we all deal in an organization with various kind of people, there are tactics involved as well, from most to least popular. Now, we take two factors. One, when does managers influence superiors? One, and when managers get influenced by subordinates. Now, when do managers get influenced by superiors? The most popular is when you have a reason about it, when there is coalition, when there is friendliness, when there is bargaining. The least popular are higher authority and assertiveness. If these are the reasons of power exertion, then the manager's influence of superior is in this order. Let's take the other example. When managers influenced subordinate, when is the manager going to influence his people below him? Now these factors, the order changes. The most popular is when they are assertive, when they have a reason about it, when they are friendly and cold, and the least is higher authority and sanction, the least powerful. Now, so very important to understand. Now, from an organizational behavior, this slide is important because it says that if you have the right kind of trust, if you have the right kind of intention, because reason gives you intention, isn't it? Purpose. If your intention is correct, if you're assertive enough, you can influence as well. Sexual harassment, unequal power in the workplace. If you have gender equality for that matter, for example, unwelcome advances, requests for sexual favors, or other verbal or physical conduct which would not be in line with the norm, definitely calls on for action as well. Politics. Now we have discussed on one front the power. In a couple of minutes we will discuss what is politics as well. Politics is power in action. So when we spoke about power, we'll also look into what does politics, this power in action means. It is a political behavior of those activities that are not required as a part of one's formal role in the organization, but that influence or attempt to influence the distribution of advantages and disadvantages with the organization. So we're looking at both these factors, any factor, any power that people are going to use it not from a person, are going to use it for their own personal benefit becomes political behavior. Legitimate and illegitimate political behaviors are common in organization. Politics is a fact in organization. It cannot be overruled. Factors contributing to political behaviors are: number one, individual factors. It could be personality, traits, needs. Second, the organizational factors. Now, what are the organizational factors that contribute to politics? Number one, example, when organization reduces, resources decline, or resources change, or low trust exists, or high performance pressure, and the opportunity of promotion exists, political behavior is likely. So examples like, if an appraisal happens, when you have only one position open for promotion and you have 5 people coming in, the chances of power getting distorted or politicized is very common. Or when resources are less, there also the chance of exploitation of this power is very much possible to understand. Now, how do people respond to organizational politics? What are the normal methodology by which people normally respond? Now, decreased job satisfaction, increased anxiety, increased turnover, and reduced performance. So normally, when people face political power personally, this is what happens. One, the satisfaction level comes down. Suppose if a person thinks somebody else was more eligible than you, less eligible than you, and he or she got promoted before you, chance of job satisfaction will come down. Anxiety level will come down because there's a lot of transparency involved. Increased turnover and decrease in performance. Defensive actions that could be taken up are reactive and proactive behaviors to avoid action, blame, or change. It is so very important that people need to think about it as well in this direction. The impression management, so very important, means the process by which individuals attempt to contract the impression others from them. Techniques include conformity, excuses, apologies, self-promotion, flattery, favors, and association. These are the things that people need to discard or reduce, because these things like conformity, excuses, blaming, off-lizing, self-promotion, flattery kind of increases the distance and trust and decreases trust as well. So if you see politics, if you are looking in the eye of the beholder, they say beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder, and so does politics as well. If you see political label and effective management label, two different terminologies, how do we address it? Blaming others, fixing responsibility. Kissing up, developing work relationships. So each of this, forming coalition, facilitating teamwork. And be cunning, practical minded, or say perfectionist, attention to detail. So all of this kind of gives a good insight. Summary, we will say that power is a two-way street. Few employees relish being powerless. People respond differently to different situations. Expert power is the most strongly and consistently related to effective employee performance. And the power of a boss may also play a major role in determining your job satisfaction.